A quiet suburban cul-de-sac unravels when one neighbor's obsession with control sparks a chain of petty wars, secret surveillance, and escalating revenge, until the entire HOA collapses under its own chaos. Let me start from beginning. The neighborhood of Willow Crest had long been advertised as a peaceful enclave, a place where trimmed hedges and tidy driveways framed a life of predictable calm. Residents accepted the occasional newsletter scolding them about decorative lawn gnomes or mailbox colors in exchange for security and conformity. But tranquility often masks tension, and beneath the manicured lawns simmered resentment waiting for the slightest spark to ignite. That spark arrived the day Olivia Renton moved into the corner house of Petunia Loop. Olivia arrived with the enthusiasm of someone who believed she had finally found her sanctuary. She saw potential in every angle of her new property, and immediately set out to transform it with bright flower beds, solar-paneled pathway lights, and a whimsical wooden archway over the front walk. She had barely lived there a week when she learned the first unwritten rule of Willow Crest. Nothing went unnoticed. Not by the HOA, and certainly not by Marlene Griggs, the self-appointed enforcer of aesthetic consistency. Marlene, who had lived there for over 15 years, regarded the neighborhood with the possessiveness of a monarch surveying her domain. From the porch of her pristine beige house, she watched Olivia's modifications with growing disapproval. Each new flower species, each potted plant, each decorative rock seemed to offend her sense of silent order. She believed Willow Crest had an image to uphold, and image, to her, was more important than the comfort or happiness of any individual resident. She prided herself on reporting even the smallest infractions before others had even noticed them. Within days, Olivia received her first HOA violation letter. It accused her of installing non-regulation exterior decor and instructed her to remove the archway within 48 hours. Confused but determined not to invite conflict, Olivia complied. But she also made a mental note of the odd timing. She had not even finished unpacking, yet someone had gone out of their way to scrutinize her yard. The next violation arrived 2 days later, citing her flower bed's shape as non-conforming. The next one targeted her solar lights for being too numerous. What began as mild annoyance evolved into a sinking realization. Someone was watching her with obsessive precision. And though the HOA board remained faceless behind its printed letters and automated emails, the disapproving stare she often caught from Marlene's porch felt unmistakably personal. Other neighbors took quiet notice. They watched Olivia's frustration grow, but most were too intimidated by Marlene's influence to intervene. Marlene had been instrumental in electing 3 of the 5 board members, and she had her own interpretation of the rules that she pushed relentlessly. People had learned that resistance only invited trouble. Yet whispers began circulating. Soft grievances about Marlene's tyrannical vigilance. Stories of past residents who had simply moved away because they were tired of fighting. The mystery deepened when Olivia found the first evidence that someone had been on her property. A faint set of shoe prints in the soil appeared beside the newly planted perennials, too far from the walkway to be accidental. She dismissed it initially, thinking perhaps it was an animal or a gardener from a previous service. But the second set of prints appeared 3 days later in a different flower bed. This time they were deeper, fresher, unmistakably from a human visitor. What unsettled her most was the impression that whoever left those footprints had lingered, standing long enough to leave clear outlines facing directly toward her living room window. Still, she tried to maintain optimism. She wanted to believe people would come around once they got to know her. But Willow Crest was a place where being new made one vulnerable, and being creative made one suspicious. She had inadvertently become a target of someone whose need for control eclipsed all neighborly goodwill. The escalation came subtly. One morning, Olivia stepped outside to find her trash bin tipped over, contents spilled deliberately into her driveway. Another day, a note appeared beneath her windshield wiper describing her house as an eyesore in progress. Then came the violation letter, insisting she repaint her door because the shade of blue she chose was inappropriately vibrant. Each action was petty but calculated. Each one chipped away at her excitement for her new home, and each one strengthened her resolve to uncover the true source of the harassment. Her breakthrough arrived when she glanced up during her grocery unloading and saw the slightest glint of reflected sunlight from Marlene's second-floor window. Something metallic, positioned at just the right angle, vanished behind the curtain a moment later. Olivia froze, realizing suddenly that her neighbor might be observing her far more closely than anyone had suspected. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by violation letters spread out like pieces of a puzzle. She saw patterns emerging, patterns that pointed unmistakably toward a single instigator. But accusation without proof would only make matters worse. She needed evidence. She needed to know exactly what was happening when she wasn't looking. And so, with frustration turning into determination, Olivia decided to take her first step toward uncovering the truth. She opened her laptop, searching for discreet home security options. If someone was watching her, she would start watching back. The moment she clicked Purchase, the balance of power in Willow Crest began to shift. The security cameras arrived in plain brown boxes, each unit small enough to blend unnoticed into the architectural corners of Olivia's house. As she mounted them one by one, she felt the first sense of control she had experienced since moving in. The stillness of early morning made the act feel almost ceremonial. The neighborhood slumbered, unaware that the quiet battle over conformity had begun its first true escalation. By the time the cameras were fully operational, Olivia had angled them strategically to capture every vulnerable perimeter. The front walkway, the driveway, the backyard gate, and the side yard where the mysterious footprints had appeared. She programmed alerts to ping her phone for any motion detected overnight. For the first time in weeks, she felt prepared. Not safe, but ready. Her readiness was quickly justified. The cameras recorded movement on the very first night. At 2:13 a.m., a figure approached her property line from the direction of Marlene's house. The intruder moved with deliberate caution, stepping into the soft soil near the flower bed where footprints had appeared before. Despite the darkness, the cameras captured enough to reveal key details. The intruder wore gardening gloves and carried a small flashlight with the beam angled downward, avoiding windows. The person paused several times, not touching anything, simply observing the layout of her yard. Then they retreated back toward Marlene's house. The footage was too grainy to identify the face, but the posture, the hair, the height. It all aligned with the neighbor who had been glaring at her since the moment she arrived. Yet it wasn't enough to confront her. The HOA would dismiss anything without solid proof, and Marlene would twist any accusation into further persecution. Olivia needed more, something undeniable. In the days that followed, the petty harassment intensified, almost as if in reaction to her newfound vigilance. Fresh violation letters accused her of improper weed control, unauthorized bird feeders, and excessive lawn ornamentation, despite the fact that she had none. Her trash bins were again overturned, this time with tire tracks nearby, as if a vehicle had nudged them intentionally. Even her mailbox hinge had been subtly loosened, making it hang crookedly. But the cameras caught each incident. Every overturned bin. Every suspicious shadow lingering too long on her property line. Every movement near her plants that should never have been disturbed. The collection of evidence grew, and so did her conviction. Meanwhile, the neighborhood began buzzing quietly. Residents observed the tension but pretended ignorance, unwilling to be pulled into the crossfire. Yet they watched Olivia's tidy front yard sprout small, discreet black camera bulbs, and they noted how Marlene's porch staring sessions had become even more frequent and tense. People whispered that something was brewing, something too big for the HOA newsletter to smooth over. Then, one afternoon, a new HOA-wide announcement arrived. An emergency meeting to discuss ongoing issues involving unapproved surveillance equipment. The wording was diplomatic, but the target was obvious. Marlene had taken her fight public. The meeting, held in the community center, was packed with uneasy residents. Olivia attended with a folder of printed stills showing the intrusions onto her property. She carried it like armor. When the board opened the floor to concerns, Marlene launched into a dramatic claim that security cameras threatened the privacy of the entire community and invited unnecessary fear. Though she remained silent, Olivia felt her pulse rising. She watched Marlene gesture toward her, painting her as paranoid and disruptive, suggesting that newcomers often misunderstood the neighborhood's expectations. The board members nodded with practiced neutrality, yet the discomfort in the room was palpable. When it was her turn to present her side, Olivia calmly placed several photos onto the table. The room tensed as they saw the late-night intruder, the overturned bins, the tampered mailbox. Murmurs spread quickly. Even without Marlene's face clearly visible, the silhouette was unmistakable. The board did not issue judgment that day. They adjourned with vague promises to review the evidence thoroughly and consider the impact on community trust. But the shift in atmosphere was unmistakable. Residents who once kept their distance now looked at Marlene with quiet suspicion. And Marlene, for her part, left the meeting with a stiffness in her posture that suggested her grip on the neighborhood was slipping. That very night, the cameras caught the boldest intrusion yet. The same figure approached Olivia's backyard gate, rattling it gently as if checking for weakness. The motion light triggered, and the silhouette froze before darting off into the darkness. It was no longer subtle observation. It was escalation born of desperation. The next morning, Olivia awoke to find a new violation letter. This one accusing her of failing to maintain a neighborly standard of peace. It was the most abstract, baseless claim yet, and also the most revealing. It showed just how threatened Marlene felt. The war between them had entered a new phase, one in which pettiness had turned into aggression, and aggression was inching toward something darker. Olivia sensed the impending confrontation, the kind that would force the true face of Willow Crest into the open. And, as she sorted through her newest batch of captured footage, she discovered a detail she had missed before, one that promised to change everything. The detail emerged almost by accident. While reviewing footage from the previous week, Olivia noticed a slight reflection on the intruder's clothing. An HOA visitor badge, the kind board members wore during neighborhood walkthroughs. Until now, she had assumed Marlene was acting alone, driven purely by personal obsession. But the badge meant something different. It suggested complicity within the board itself. The realization reframed every violation letter, every targeted accusation. The harassment was not just the product of one neighbor's controlling tendencies. It was the result of a coordinated effort, a system that allowed certain individuals unchecked authority disguised as community maintenance. Willow Crest had not merely tolerated Marlene, it had empowered her. And now, cornered by evidence slipping out of her control, she had reached a level of recklessness that betrayed desperation. Determined to expose the truth, Olivia compiled her footage into a meticulously organized digital report. She added timestamps, comparisons, and overlays showing that the intruder's clothing matched what Marlene wore regularly: a specific cardigan, a patterned scarf, a dark visor. As she worked, her sense of isolation slowly shifted into resolve. This was no longer about her flower beds or her door color. This was about the safety and integrity of everyone who had been silently bullied for years. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following week. Olivia knew that by then Marlene might escalate further. And she was right. 2 nights before the meeting, the intruder returned. This time, the figure moved with frantic energy, pacing along the property line as if searching for the hidden cameras. They approached the front garden, pushing aside a cluster of plants and examining the soil. Then they circled to the backyard and lifted the corner of a garden tarp, rifling through supplies without purpose. It was the behavior of someone unraveling. When the motion light flared on, the intruder stumbled back in panic. Their visor slipped, and for a split second, the cameras caught a clear profile, confirmation of what Olivia already knew. Marlene had been tormenting her in the dead of night, leveraging the HOA's authority to disguise her personal vendetta as regulation. The moment the footage finished uploading to the cloud, the outcome of the meeting became inevitable. On the evening of the gathering, the community room filled to capacity. The atmosphere buzzed with tension. Word had spread that something significant was about to unfold. Even those who usually ignored HOA politics arrived, driven by curiosity and tiredness from years of petty enforcement. Olivia sat near the front, her laptop connected to the projector. The board began with formalities, but the veneer of control cracked quickly when she requested the floor. She explained that the ongoing accusations against her had gone far beyond reasonable enforcement, and that she had gathered evidence of repeated trespassing, property tampering, and targeted harassment. The board attempted to interrupt, but the crowd urged her to continue, and then she played the footage. Gasps rippled through the room as Marlene's nighttime prowling filled the screen. Each clip showed her entering Olivia's property with intent, surveying the yard, disturbing objects, tipping bins, and inspecting windows. The profile image appeared last, displayed long enough to leave no room for denial. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Marlene, seated stiffly in the second row, did not move. Her face drained of color as neighbors stared at her with shock, anger, and betrayal. She opened her mouth once as if to speak, but then closed it, unable to form a justification that anyone would believe. The board scrambled, insisting they had no knowledge of her actions. Yet the presence of the HOA badge in the footage made their denials ring hollow. Several residents demanded explanations for past incidents that had mysteriously gone unresolved. Long-buried grievances spilled into the open. What began as a simple confrontation unraveled into a full rebellion. The meeting devolved into chaos as residents demanded accountability, transparency, and immediate action. Petitions circulated for the removal of multiple board members. Others called for a complete restructuring of the HOA's authority. The board, unable to control the uproar, adjourned abruptly, but the damage was permanent. In the days that followed, the fallout spread quickly. Marlene resigned under pressure, leaving an apologetic note taped to her front door that did little to satisfy the neighbors she had tormented. 2 board members stepped down as well amid accusations of enabling her behavior through selective enforcement practices. The HOA faced an internal audit, followed by emergency leadership elections. For the first time in years, Willow Crest experienced something unfamiliar: freedom. Residents began repainting doors, planting flowers, and removing outdated restrictions. Conversations bloomed over fences that had once divided. Neighbors who had always been polite strangers began forming real connections, united by the shared recognition of what they had endured. As for Olivia, her property slowly returned to the peaceful sanctuary she had envisioned. The cameras remained, not as a symbol of fear, but as a reminder of her resilience. She spent her mornings tending to her garden, her evenings enjoying the quiet she had fought so hard for. And though she passed Marlene's now vacant house with a mixture of relief and lingering unease, she knew the danger had passed. Yet Willow Crest would never fully forget what had happened. The neighborhood had seen what can emerge when unchecked authority mingles with personal grudges. They understood now that vigilance belonged to everyone, not to a single self-appointed watchdog. The community was healing, but it was wiser than before. And, as the seasons changed, the cul-de-sac that once echoed with silent battles grew vibrant again. Not with conformity, but with renewed trust. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.